Hello everyone, welcome to another lecture of SME Medical, and in today's session we'll be talking about pathology of asthma. So what is asthma? Asthma is a condition where you have increased bronchial hyperactivity, when you have increased bronchial hyperreactivity and bronchoconstriction happens inside your airways. That is when you call a condition asthma. Asthma is basically reversible in nature and it shows a obstructive lung pattern when you look at it and on the spirometry. So amongst all the other diseases that come under the obstructive lung pattern, asthma is the one that is reversible, and its reversibility is of high importance, and we'll see when we talk about this investigation. So what are the different kinds of asthma? They are mentioned on the board. We have atopic asthma, non-atopic asthma, and aspirin-induced asthma. So let's look at them one by one and see what is the differentiating factors in each type, which is why we have classified them into three different classifications. So when we talk about atopic asthma, what is atopy? Atopy is a condition where you have allergic reaction. It's basically an allergic reaction in a body, and this could happen in various people due to family histories, and they could be due to anything. So atopy is basically allergy, and it could be due to anything. So when we talk about atopic asthma, it's basically asthma relating to a allergic condition. So atopic asthma usually happens in people who have different other kinds of allergies and hypersensitivity reactions as well. So when we talk about hypersensitivity reactions, they are basically type 1 delayed hypersensitivity reaction, right? Like we have 4 different types of reactions: type 1, type 2, type 3, and type 4. So type 1 is the one that comes under the hypersensitivity heading. So in atopic asthma, you just won't find a patient with a complaint of asthma. They'll also have other kinds of hypersensitivities as well, which could either be runny nose, which is basically your allergic rhinitis, and you could also have eczema in a patient that is basically atopic dermatitis. So you would also find a history of other hypersensitivity reactions as well. In atopic asthma, you have 2 things that you need to make sure of that are different from these 2 other asthmas. The first one is it's basically young age के अंदर आपको होता है usually in children. So always remember that it happens in children young age. Secondly, you have a positive family history in atopic asthma. By positive family history, I mean that you will find a history in either parents, siblings, or anything. This is something that runs in the family. So you will have a positive family history. Now, since we have established that atopic asthma is basically a hypersensitivity reaction, it has a correlation with other hypersensitivity conditions as well. And atopy is basically hypersensitivity, and it is basically your type 1 delayed hypersensitivity reaction, right? So, what could be the causes that can cause atopic asthma? So, we have a few written over here. They are basically dust. Dust is very common. We have dust in our environment normally. Some people could be hypersensitive to dust. When you are hypersensitive to dust, that is when you can have atopic asthma. Apart from that, we have pollen. Pollen is a really common cause of atopic asthma in Western countries. When we have pollen in our environment, in our air. That is when people have atopic asthma due to pollen, or it could be due to pets. Pets could be cats, dogs. You could have birds in your house. That could cause hypersensitivity of your airways and eventually cause atopic asthma. So briefly, it's basically a young age के अंदर होता है. So usually in children with a positive family history, also relating to other hypersensitivity reactions, and to name a few causes: dust, pollen, and pets. Coming on to non-atopic asthma, when we talk about non-atopic asthma, that basically means there is no relation with any kind of atopy, that is no correlation with any hypersensitivity. Over here we discussed runny nose or atopic dermatitis. Over here the patient might not have any of those conditions, which is why it is non-atopic. So if it's non-atopic, so how could it be different from atopic asthma? To name the 2 things that we mentioned here, when we talk about non-atopic asthma, it happens in adults, usually over the age of 40, who are old. Secondly, you will not find a positive family history. You will have the patient will say, no one in my family, no one in my home has similar symptoms that I am facing. So negative family history. So Since we have differentiated atopic and non-atopic, so let's look at the causes of non-atopic asthma. What could be the causes that can trigger non-atopic asthma? That is, causes that are in no way near to any kind of hypersensitivity. So you have exercise. Exercise can be a trigger in a lot of adults causing non-atopic asthma. Apart from that, you could have stress, emotional stress, physical stress, cold air, that is in winters. In winters you will come across a lot of people say complaining of symptoms of asthma, and when you will look into it, you will end up finding non-atopic asthma due to cold air. Apart from these three things, you have a lot of other causes such as consumption of betel nuts, using oral contraceptives, beta blockers, people who have GERD, people who use proton pump inhibitors due to GERD. All of these can cause non-atopic asthma, but a major cause of non-atopic asthma is upper respiratory tract infections. Like any agent could be a trigger for non-atopic asthma. Any agent would cause a upper respiratory tract infection and can eventually cause non-atopic asthma. So, like any agent, just to name an example, we can have respiratory syncytial virus (RSV), which can cause non-atopic asthma. So atopic and non-atopic have a clear differentiating line between the two, like the causes, the hypersensitivity, and the correlations, age, family history. All of these are very different in the two, so you can keep that in mind. Coming on to the last classification for today, which is aspirin-induced asthma. Now, aspirin is basically a drug that you give to patients to thin their blood for to prevent any clots. So, how can aspirin cause asthma? Let's look at it. Now, you all would have definitely heard about arachidonic acid, prostaglandins, leukotrienes, all of these things. So let's see, the whole pathway of it. We have arachidonic acid, and it has two pathways. The first pathway undergoes cyclooxygenase, processing, and the other one undergoes lipoxygenase processing. So what happens is, when arachidonic acid, when cyclooxygenase enzymes act on arachidonic acid, they end up producing prostaglandins, and mainly prostaglandin E2. When arachidonic acid is acted upon by lipoxygenase, it ends up producing leukotrienes. So what does prostaglandin do and what does leukotrienes do? Prostaglandins are responsible for your bronchodilation. PGE2, prostaglandin E2 namely, it is responsible for your bronchodilation. And as we discussed earlier, that in asthma you have bronchoconstriction. So, just to relate it here, higher levels of prostaglandin E2 will eventually prevent asthma, right? Because asthma is bronchoconstriction and prostaglandin causes bronchodilation, right? Now let's talk about leukotrienes. What do leukotrienes do? Leukotrienes are responsible for bronchoconstriction. So prostaglandins cause bronchodilation, leukotrienes cause bronchoconstriction. Now this happens in a normal adult, but this whole balance is in equilibrium. But if I were to tip this balance in, in a way that would cause bronchoconstriction, that is when you can have, aspirin-induced asthma in a person. As long as it's in equilibrium, you're perfectly fine. Now, how can you tip the balance? This is a normal, pathway that follows. But when a patient consumes aspirin, now what does aspirin eventually do? Aspirin is basically a COX inhibitor. It inhibits COX. It is going to inhibit your cyclooxygenase system. Now, when you inhibit cyclooxygenase, you will have low levels of prostaglandin, right? So, this arrow is going to go downward. You will have low levels of prostaglandin. Now, when you have low levels of prostaglandin, that means you won't have any bronchodilation, right? You don't have any agent that is going to allow for bronchodilation. On the other hand, aspirin has no effect on lipoxygenase. Hence, lipoxygenase is going to stay the way it is, and it is going to keep producing leukotrienes. Hence, leukotriene levels won't go down like prostaglandin levels went. So, high levels of leukotrienes, uninhibited leukotrienes. What do leukotrienes do? They cause bronchoconstriction. Hence, you can see no bronchodilation but bronchoconstriction, which will eventually cause asthma. So, will everyone using aspirin have aspirin-induced asthma? No. Like we discussed in atopic asthma, that a few people have a higher risk of developing asthma, and who are the people in atopic asthma? People with other allergic conditions, right? Other hypersensitivity conditions. So talking about the people who will have aspirin-induced asthma, the people who will have a higher incidence of developing aspirin-induced asthma will be the ones who have nasal polyps, or they could be the ones with rhinitis. People having rhinitis or people having nasal polyps will have a higher chance of developing aspirin-induced asthma. Hence, you have to see if a patient has these two conditions, then you're not supposed to prescribe them aspirin, prescribe them any other drug that can, act in place of aspirin. So these were the three major classifications. You have other minor classifications as well, but these are the three major classifications that are, concerning asthma. Now, what actually happens in asthma? Let's have a look at it. What follows? What is the underlying pathology? So, any of these asthma, let's talk about atopic asthma. If a person has atopic asthma, what will happen? Now, you come across any hypersensitive antigen, someone hypersensitive to dust, pollen, or pests. They come in contact with any of these. What will happen is that you have T helper 2 cells inside your airways, right? Now, what happens? When you come across with, come in contact with any of these antigens, your T helper 2 cells are going to get activated. They will identify these antigens. Now, what do T helper 2 cells do? T helper 2 cells are going to release interleukins. Which interleukins? These three: IL-4, IL-5, and IL-13. Now, what do these interleukins do? So we'll discuss each of them individually and see what happens. Now, interleukin 4 is responsible for class switching. Now, before I explain interleukin 4, let's have a brief, concept overview that in a person who is normal with no underlying pathology or anything, their airways are guarded by IgA, which is immunoglobulin A. You have different kinds of immunoglobulins in your body: IgA, IgG, IgM. You may have definitely heard of them. So our respiratory pathways are guarded by IgA. This is what happens in a normal human being. Now, these immunoglobulins are produced by B cells, right? You have B cells and T cells, plasma cells and all. So B cells are the ones that produce immunoglobulins. So what IL-4 does is, IL-4 is released by T helper 2 cells. IL-4 goes and acts on B cells, and what does it do? It tells your B cells to, instead of producing IgA, start producing IgE. What will IL-4 do? It will go and cause class switching from IgA to IgE. So you have high levels of IgE now in your body. Apart from IL-4, let's talk about what IL-5 does. Now, IL-5 is responsible. Okay, so we have class switching of IgA to IgE. Now, what does IgE do? You release IgE instead of IgA. So what's the point of it? Now, what IgE does is IgE goes and binds to mast cells. Now, how does it bind to mast cells? Mast cells have a Fc receptor, and IgE goes and binds to mast cells. Now, what happens when they both bind? They end up releasing IL-5, interleukin 5. So we already have IL-5 here. So mast cells are going to release interleukin 5. Now, let's see what interleukin 5 does. We saw IL-4 does class switching, right? So what does IL-5 do? Because IL-5 is being released by T helper 2 cells as well as mast cells, right? So IL-5 is responsible for recruitment of eosinophils. What are eosinophils? Eosinophils are cells that are present in all kinds of hypersensitivity reactions. Whenever you have a hypersensitivity condition, you will always have a higher number of eosinophils rather than a person with no hypersensitivity conditions at all. Now, this whole thing is basically the underlying pathology of atopic asthma. We're not talking about non-atopic or aspirin-induced. We're only talking about what happens in atopic asthma. And I mentioned that atopic asthma is a kind of hypersensitivity condition associating with other hypersensitivity conditions as well. So, since it's a hypersensitivity condition, you will definitely have eosinophils, right? So, IL-5 is responsible for what? Recruitment of eosinophils. Now, you have your eosinophils, you have your class switching. This was done by IL-4 and IL-5, right? Now, what happens by IL-13? What does IL-13 do? So, when you have a patient of asthma, they will have a common complaint, which is cough. It could be dry or wet. If it's wet, that is due to IL-13, because IL-13 is responsible for mucus production. IL-4 for class switching, IL-5 for recruitment of eosinophils, and IL-13 is responsible for what? Mucus production. Now, basically, when we talk about all of these, you have all of this divided into two segments. You have an early phase and you have a late phase. in the early phase, you have vasodilation, increased vascular permeability, bronchoconstriction. All of these things happen in your early phase. What happens in your late phase? Like basically, early phase and late phase happens in atopic asthma, right? Now, all of this is a mixture of early and late phase. So, early phase के अंदर आपके पास bronchoconstriction होती है, increased vascular permeability, vasodilation of your airways, and everything. What happens in your late phase? Late phase के अंदर you have one thing. Like this is all that happens in the late phase, which is recruitment of eosinophils. Your inflammatory cells come in the late phase. And one thing, even if you have recruitment of eosinophils, it shouldn't be a big deal. I mean, IgA release or IgE release or eosinophils release, like why is that such a huge like deal? Because eosinophils, when they are when they come towards your airways and all, what do? They release two things that basically mediate the whole damage. And what are those two things? The two things are major basic protein and eosinophilic cationic protein. So major basic protein, short for MBP, and eosinophilic cationic protein, which is short for ECP. So this is what happens when we say that a patient has atopic asthma. This is what happens when we say that a patient has aspirin-induced asthma. Now, what happens in non-atopic asthma? Like you come across anything that you're not allergic to, but exercise, stress, cold air, or anything. This could just cause recruitment of your neutrophils. They can cause inflammation, narrowing of your airways, and that is it. Like you just have recruitment of your inflammatory cells. They cause obstruction in your airways, bronchoconstriction, and that is how your non-atopic asthma, the pura underlying pathology, mediate hoti hai. So in this lecture, we talked about what is asthma, the different classifications of asthma, causes, the differentiating factors, and the underlying pathology in each one of them: atopic, non-atopic, and aspirin-induced asthma. So this is all you need to know for just the basics of pathology of asthma. If there are any questions, you can always leave them down in our comment section or reach out to us on our Facebook page. Thank you.